Final city, final country, Bali, Indonesia.
No.
So I'll go back to why Bali?
It was that we're already in Southeast Asia. We've done 2 big cities and we thought, okay, let's do another sort of chilled place, beach, more relaxing vibe. We've gone through all the stress. We want to end on a relaxing note. We'd been to Thailand already. So Indonesia, Bali felt like the next, one we needed to sort of see. So that's why we picked Bali.
How would you describe Bali?
It was surprisingly chaotic. Like when you see all this stuff on Instagram and all of that, you think the whole of Bali is just this one big beach and is very relaxed and all of that. It was giving Lagos vibes. Like it was really busy. So it was fairly chaotic, beautiful beaches and all of that. Very set up for tourists. But yeah, that took me by surprise just how chaotic it was.
So, this is now the final run into 40. How does that decade feel for you? At this point, you're starting to have children, you're making headway with your career, you've done a couple of years of marriage, you have all these different roles that you play, your friend, mom, sister, wife, worker in church, all of these things, daughter as well, really importantly. So what does that decade feel like for you?
Chaotic. Honestly, 30 leading into 40 is like you're trying to, and I know I'm not alone in this, is you're trying to find, it's a balancing act. How do you show up in all these different spaces in your best way, but still also make time for yourself? And very often, I'm not gonna lie, I got that balance wrong. But that's what Bali was like a little bit. It has the opportunity for the reset because going to any of those resorts or even just being on the beach, is a real reset. It's calm. You can put everything behind when you're in certain spaces. That beach that we went to, Balagan Beach, exactly. It was our Uber driver was the one that selected that beach for us, wasn't he? Dude, or was it Dude? I think his name is Dude, but he said we should call him Dude. And it was unspoiled, so to speak. There wasn't a lot of tourists on there. It was just zen. It was calm. So yes, I would say the parallel to my 30s is sort of making intentional choices to have that zen. Otherwise, you get overwhelmed by the chaos. And that's something that closer to 40 was when I sort of started being a bit more intentional about stepping away from it all and not taking so much on, because I would say late 20s, my answer to everything was yes. Uju, can you do this? Yes. Would you do that? Yes. Be it family, be it church, work, whatever. No was not in my vocabulary in that sense. And you just feel overwhelmed and I carried on with that. And then by the time you get to 2 kids,
continue to control the virus and save lives. And yet we must also recognise that this campaign against the virus has come at colossal cost to our way of life.
two things forced me to have that reset. COVID was one of them. Because COVID was a hard stop for everybody. Now, COVID had its own chaos, but the chaos was in the house. And what that made me what forced me to learn is how to put a stop to the chaos outside. It was possible. We all had to do it. So I then picked up stuff outside the house as and when. Back to Bali, and the parallel is just the shift between the chaos and this relaxation and balancing it all.
I'd seen a lot about Bali and I'd been on the fence about going, to be honest. We went because I was like, okay, I'd like to tag something at the end of the 3 cities because we had a few days. There was no point going back to work like on a Wednesday, having flown back the day before. So I thought, why don't you just take this into the weekend? And in some ways, it felt like I sort of embodied the Bali spirit, which was more, it was very much around social media. You hear a lot about like these digital nomads, and it's like a young crowd and stuff, and unintentionally I found myself in a place where it's like I felt like I was then starting to create more heavily for social media, because I'd gone on this path where I was like, okay, I want people to see, I want the group to see the pictures, I want to see, and then put a couple of reels and clips together. But I feel like I tipped it over at some point into doing it purely for that purpose as opposed to retain these memories. So it then means that I look back at the experience with a slight bit of unease, I would say. But maybe it was something that was much needed. It was something that needed to happen, because I then really genuinely found that the next trip we made, I was stuck in a certain place creatively, and a bit of me was refusing to create the same stuff that I've been creating. So I don't look at it with any sort of form of shame. I think it was necessary that I went through the experience. I also don't regret what we created. I just think obviously there's a thing about when I see something and hit the button on the camera to shoot, very different sometimes to what then becomes the output. So for me, I just think Bali represented the start of a shift for me mentally, and possibly, one of the big contributors to why I'm actually starting to create slightly different content now.
Connected, yeah? One cup. So let you try first, yeah? We'll pick that.
Go on there, try the coffee.
Coffee? It's not coffee, it's coffee.
I think that's its pronunciation. Are you sure?
Listen to me, listen. Listen. You're not the same.
Where are you
It's
from?
not bad. London. She brought 5 colors, man.
What we know is what we know, please.
See your face. Maintain steals. Yeah.
As in,
That steals, you know, maintain. You know what I mean? The politics.
Overall, my view on Bali, and if I cover some of the highs and lows, it was obviously, going to that Balangan beach, it was just a lovely day. A lovely beach. It wasn't my typical type of beach because I'm not used to all the rocks and stones and stuff like that. But when we got there, I was like, okay, this is unspoiled, this is different. Blue waters just do something to me, So that was nice, and it was what we needed because it was the final stop, and we intentionally put somewhere that was more beach vibe, relaxation. We stayed in a resort, so that was definitely a high for me. Low, I would say, to the point around just packed and just having that many people. It felt like it was very tourist heavy, but that's fine. It's your choice where you stay. But it was more because of where we stayed. We stayed in Kuta. Kuta is one of the areas really close to the airport. So it's fantastic if you want to be in and out, or you want to be as close to the airport as possible. I prefer to be close to the airport because I prefer to be able to get to the airport fairly quickly rather than the unknown of the in-betweens. Like if I leave somewhere that's meant to be 30 minutes away, will I get there in 30 minutes? Will I get there in 40, an hour? It's just my
You are an airport paranoia.
So, but at the same time, it also meant that when we were navigating, going to places like Uluwatu, Ubud, we then ran into like insane levels of traffic. So that's my thing, that I think it was a downer, but it was partly self-inflicted because it was our choice to stay where we stayed. So
Definitely, if I were to go back, I would probably stay in either Uluwatu or Ubud, just because most of the attractions in quotes are around there, and just building enough time to get to the airport when we're going. In terms of, I think Bali is one of those where you see those reels, Instagram versus reality. It was very, very obvious in, like, those rice fields, those pictures you see of people in all those floating dresses. You think like they're the only ones in this big unspoiled area. Man, it's just how packed. Even the waterfalls, people manage to be able to take one picture in one isolated spot, and you think that person was alone in this huge waterfall. Film trick. So Bali highlights just how much of a scam social media can be.
I agree.
When you go to Bali, it really brings it home for you, that what you see is not really the reality.
And I guess the way I would sum up the 2 weeks, it was 2 weeks of immense relationship building and some experiences we had that were just unrivaled and continue to be built over time. It was also eye-opening for reasons I've just said, with regards to how you can have too much of a good thing sometimes, in the way in which you leverage it and the way you use it. But that was more of a personal point for me. I think the parallel point to the point I made around being too caught up in creating for social media was, there were times on that trip where I think we felt like we'd lost our connection. And this might be a whole different sort of episode where it comes to how you balance staying connected with people who are close to you whilst also catering to a big group. So we had good times, and we had disconnects as a lot of people would, but so it wasn't perfect, but it's saying that life isn't. And for us, I guess the one thing I come away from, it was the highlight of 2025, but it was reflective of the immense level of privilege that we have to be able to have that experience. And I'm not coming at this from a negative standpoint. There are people who do bigger and greater things, but we'd never done anything like that before. Our friends may have, but a big part of that group might not have had anything similar to that, or sort of on that scale, that sort of distance. I think what it did for a lot of us within the group got us really interested in multi-city travel. So it feels like there will be a few on the horizon. I think we've got a couple planned over the next couple of years. But overall, I'm I'm thankful that we were able to experience this and we were able to come away from it with no mishaps. Being thankful for the people who were on the trip with us, being thankful that we were able to do this. It wasn't a cheap trip by any stretch of the imagination. And thankful that at the end of it, we only built relationships and nothing got pulled down. That's it. So for me, that was my reflection of Southeast Asia.
Absolutely. I remember when we first started planning, I'm like, who's going to pay this kind of money to come on a trip for somebody else's birthday? I'm like, no one is going to do it. But 16 people did. Some people for 3 days. And it's a big sacrifice. They left their kids, came to spend a week and a half, some people 2 weeks.
To God be the glory. See you on the next one.